Hey geeks, what's going on? Figured I don't know, I just figured I'd do a video off the cuff here, like most of my videos. I'm drinking some coffee out of my very well-worn Transformers coffee mug. um, Speaking of Transformers, I'm sitting here in my second office, and this is also my comic book library room. Um, and I have within arm's reach, um, access to a multitude of comic books and graphic novels and um, books in general, but mostly comics in this room. Um, let's see, what can we pull off the shelf? I was just looking at. I came in here this morning because I was looking for Star Trek comics. Is trying to. I've done a really bad job of keeping a list of everything that I own in my collection. So sometimes that can result in buying duplicates. I'll buy something and then like 6 months later I'll be, oh shit, I already have that up there on that shelf over there. And that happened to me this morning. Oh yeah. Okay, I know what we can grab. Speaking of Star Trek, that's what I came here for. On my last video I had done. We did a quick look at a Gold Key Star Trek comic book. It was part of that Spock Reflections graphic novel from IDW, and yeah. So I was like thinking to myself, do I have those Gold Key collected editions? And you can get them pretty much at. I would say I know they're at my local comic book shop. You could probably find them at most local comic book shops. Um, they're sort of available on Amazon, but the pricing is like all over the place. Some of them are low. There's only, I think, two or three hardcover volumes. But it actually turned out I have a softcover TPB. And this is issues 1 through 8 in this. This was published by Checker. So this isn't, I think IDW had been republishing these. But I think Checker had the license to them before IDW did. So this book probably goes back a ways in terms of when it was published. And this is issues 1 through 8 of the original Gold Key comics. So I'll just read some of the synopsis here. Star Trek comics debuted in 1967, the year after the original television series premiered, and continued on an irregular serial schedule until 1979 under Western Publishing's Gold Key imprint. Newsprint paperback collections dubbed the Enterprise Logs were also offered in the 1970s. So it's very interesting. While the Star Trek show was on NBC in the 60s, they were publishing comics actively, Star Trek comics based on the show. The comics feature the original Starship Enterprise crew in Star Trek adventures, which couldn't be produced in any other medium and remain available nowhere else. Well, until IDW, I think, started republishing them. So anyway, I think this might have been the first collected edition of those comics. And yeah, I mean, you would find stories and artwork that you wouldn't see in the show because comics is such a fantastical medium. You're going to find, stories and artwork that you just aren't reflected in the show. Like you're not the set design and so forth. The the really far outness of the aliens, the design of a lot of the ships. And I used to, when I first got into reading Star Trek comics, was in the 80s when DC Comics had the property. And I think they started with the movies. They started, kind of serializing the movie. I think they started with Star Trek the Motion Picture. They did, I think, a two, yeah, I think it was a two or maybe four issue miniseries of that film. And then they kind of just went from there. They started, writing their own stories and so forth with the approval, I guess, of Paramount Pictures and Star Trek, and Gene Roddenberry, and so forth. So that's how I got into collecting them. The Gold Key stuff, I wasn't really aware of that till later on. And I think I scooped up a few back issues when I was a kid, but I was mostly focused on the current day Star Trek comics that were coming out. And because the Gold Key stuff to me, because I was such a comic snob back then, I was just like, I'd thumb my nose at it. Really, I was like, well, those are that's like that old '60s comic stuff, Star Trek, and I was into '60s, Silver Age superheroes, but I don't know. I think I didn't like these comics because they didn't look enough like the show. To me, they looked like more pulpish, which is now why I love them because they're so retro and and I think the artists were somewhat consistent, and they were like, so if you saw my last video, that the scoop was is that when Gold Key was making these, they were hiring like European comic book artists. So I don't think you've got a dearth of well-known American comic names on these Gold Key issues. It wasn't until I think DC, and then I think eventually Marvel also had the property before IDW did, that you will find, more well-named or well-known comic book artists. I think like who was doing? I think Simonson was involved. Um, Bill Mantlo. Who were some of the other people? I don't. Michael Golden might have even drawn an issue of Star Trek. But these are yeah, these artists who did these Gold Key comics were not well known in the states at the time. I mean, we're talking the '60s. So these were artists that were active in the '60s, and I'm not even sure if they have credit. Oh yeah, they do. Okay, so the artwork in these 8 issues of Star Trek were done by Nevio Zaccara and Alberto Giolitti. So those are the two artists. So yeah, couple of Italian guys that they, and I'd have to research. I don't know what they were doing in Europe at the time. You know, European '60s comics. They were probably doing erotica or something. If you know, you know. So or they were doing Tintin. I don't know. Who knows? So I'm not well versed on European '60s comics so much, other than what I've read in the comics encyclopedias. But yeah, the artwork is actually pretty damn cool. I'm digging it. I love the sort of the color palette in these. It's just sort of a lot of earth tones. There's kind of earthy color palette. It's really cool. Here's a time travel issue. They're like, speaking of Europeans, they're like traveling around in France. They're flying around the Eiffel Tower. Um, there was one panel in here I wanted to show. Oh, here it is. Yeah, the Sphinx. Star Trek hangs out at the Sphinx. Looks like it took a phaser cannon shot too. So yeah, these are cool. I love these. I love these. Look at this. This is how pristine I keep my car. This thing's an excellent show. Okay, so then we've got, what else do we have? I was trying to pull together these Star Trek New Visions books by John Byrne. I've got volumes 1 and 2. I know that I have other volumes, probably in some of my short boxes. I'm trying to figure out what volumes those are, though. Do I have volume 3? Do I have 4? I think there's up to like 8 or 9 volumes of this, and these are substantial TPBs. So this series must have run for quite a while, but and I've showed these off before, at least the first volume. So we'll look at the second volume here. Yeah. So yeah, the thing about these is back in the day, as I'm speaking, I'm looking around at stuff. Back in the day, when I was a kid, Star Trek used to publish these photo books that were all like stills of episodes published in full color and like these little paperback, high glossy paper, photo books. And that's what they called them back then. I think they call them something different now. And I'm trying to see if I've got one nearby up here on this bookshelf. And I don't think that I do, which is weird because I thought I had them all together. But where the heck is that? I actually recently went and found one. Oh, there it is. Yes, this is cool. They don't publish these too much anymore. They actually photo books are big in Japan. They do it for anime and stuff. But this is one of the Star Trek motion picture, and so like they literally just take scenes of the movie and then they just they throw in the dialogue, and so they kind of turn it into a comic book in a way, even though these are all actual movie stills from the movie Star Trek the motion picture. Isn't that cool? So they did this with a lot of the, maybe all of the episodes from the original series, and they would publish these in the 80s is when I was buying them. So they were either still published then or somehow I had access to them. I don't know where I was getting them from. I think I was buying them from Walden Books, if you remember them. This is before Barnes and Noble and Amazon and so yeah, it was just another way to consume the media. It's like, oh, I've already seen the movie, but now I want to relive the adventure in these photo books. So having these, knowing that they did these, apparently John Byrne was of a fan of those as well. So he created Star Trek New Visions. And so what he did in these books is he took, I guess he somehow had digital access to all of the original series episodes. And then he would take those and he would basically throw them into Photoshop and start cutting out all these different elements, characters, scenes, backgrounds, and then he would recompose them, collage them, if you will, into new stories, which I thought was just absolutely brilliant. And as we know, John Byrne is a an excellent comic book artist and writer. But in these books, he uses this photo story technique to create all new stories for Star Trek, the original series, and these are sort of, they're not canon, but they could be because they pick up after the series ends in the third season, which is presumably the third year of the original 5-year mission. So these are so cool because I mean the the stories, at least in volume one, I don't think I've read volume two yet, but the stories in volume one, which is what I showed way back when in one of my first videos, was basically a sequel to where to the episode where No Man Has Gone Before. They go back through um, the what was it's not the neutral zone, but the the galactic barrier or whatever. And they go back to that planet where oh, I can't believe I can't remember his name. Where they left Gary. What was his name? Gary something or other. Let's see here. If you remember that Star Trek episode where they went through that void and they got and um, it made Gary, what was his name? When you get old, your memory starts. Gary Mitchell. It made Gary Mitchell super intelligent, and he could read minds. And then eventually, he got so powerful he could begin to manipulate. His telekinesis was like off the charts, and then he could start to manipulate matter. And so he ended up having a fight with Captain Kirk, and Kirk ended up, um, with the help of one of the ensigns, Elizabeth Daner. She also had the effect, and her and Kirk teamed up to kill Gary because he was getting godlike and he just was threatening to destroy the Enterprise and so forth. So if you've seen the episode, you know that synopsis, you know that plot. Classic episode, absolutely. One of the early episodes of the show. Um, and they take he literally takes stills from that show and kind of repurposes them into this. This is actually a kind of a synopsis of what I was just talking about, sort of a flashback. So they go back to that planet to take care of some unfinished business, and so it's just brilliant, the stuff that he does in these comics. So all new stories written by John Byrne, taking all these visual photo still elements from from the original show. And the the old Photoshop geek in me, and I haven't used Photoshop in a decade. Um, I just love the idea that check out that robot. Now that is not from the show, so I think they're, again, artistic freedom. Byrne had the leeway to insert certain new elements into it, but for the most part, now that creature also, I don't think that creature is from the original show, but those spacesuits definitely are from original episodes. And if you're a super Star Trek nerd, you can pick out elements like those spacesuits and be like, oh yeah, that was from episode so and so and so and so. I'm not at that level. I used to be a long time ago, but I'm not at that level. I would say though, Amok Time would be my guess, but am I right? I don't know. I'll have to look. Or that space station there. That wasn't from the original episodes, but that's something that Byrne probably came up with. It might be a digital rendering of some sort. That's what it looks like. It looks like a 3D digital rendering that he just cropped and pasted into this book. There's another good shot of it. You can see he's playing with the backgrounds also in Photoshop. And then I assume also the word balloons and so forth in the letter, he probably did that in Photoshop as well, I think. It's hard to tell, but I don't think he pasted them in there or anything like that. There's in each one of these in the forwards, he talks a little bit about his process here. Let's see, and these were published 2015 is when this TPB came out. So the original floppies, I actually have never seen any of the floppies out in the wild. So I assume these probably came out 2014, 2013. I don't know. There seems to be a lot of issues of them because there's like 8 volumes of this, maybe 9. So it ran through IDW for quite a while. Um, yeah, so pretty cool. I've got to figure out which other volumes of these I have. I think I only have like maybe one. It might be like volume 4, but eventually I want to collect. and read all of these because I'm a Star Trek geek, especially for the old school Star Trek. Let's see. Well, this video is at 20 minutes, so in order to keep the algorithm happy, maybe I'll just end it here. So we keep it to the topic of Star Trek. Anyway, thanks for joining, and until the next one, I hope you're having a fantastic winter, you have a wonderful Christmas, and Happy New Year. Until the next one, then, stay geek.